Imagine a world where you can't say, "I'm hungry, look out," or even "I love you." A world where every thought, every warning, every feeling must be carried not by sentences, but by the tilt of your head, the shape of your mouth, the way your body moves. That was the reality for our distant ancestors tens of thousands of years ago. Before the dawn of language, humans already had one urgent problem to solve. Communication meant survival. If you couldn't warn your group about a stalking predator, you might lose more than just the hunt. You might lose your life. If you couldn't signal where fresh water flowed, or which plants were poisonous, the risk of sickness or starvation grew. With every passing day, we tend to picture pre-language humans as quiet, even simple, but that's a dangerous misconception. They were thinking, feeling, and planning creatures just like us. Their minds were alive with ideas. They simply didn't have the modern toolkit of spoken words to express them. Instead, communication lived in the realm of the senses. A raised hand might mean stop. A sudden crouch could mean danger. A shared glance across the campfire could mean yes, I saw it too. In this world, silence was never truly silent. The air between people was alive with meaning. Archaeologists and anthropologists now believe that these early forms of communication were already incredibly sophisticated long before the first proto-words emerged. And this sophistication didn't just appear overnight. It evolved alongside our ancestors' growing brains, their need for cooperation, and the challenges of a hostile environment. Picture a hunting party creeping through the tall grass. They can't speak. The prey would bolt. Instead, one hunter points subtly with his chin, another mimics the posture of the animal they're tracking, and a third shifts their weight ever so slightly to indicate readiness. Without a single word, the group shares a complete strategy. But this wasn't just about hunting. Early humans used gestures, facial expressions, sounds, and even the way they stood to navigate social life. Who had authority? Who was trustworthy? Who had done something wrong? All of this could be signaled and read, without a word spoken. And here's something fascinating. Our modern brains are still wired for this. Scientists estimate that up to 70% of human communication today is nonverbal. In other words, even with all the words in the world, we still rely mostly on the ancient systems our ancestors used. So the world before words wasn't an empty stage, waiting for language to arrive. It was a vibrant, pulsing theater of movement, sound, and expression. And in that theater, every performance could mean the difference between life and death. Which brings us to our next question. If you don't have words, what becomes your vocabulary? The answer lies in the body itself. Long before the first carved symbols, or guttural proto-words, the body was our primary instrument of expression. We didn't just live in our bodies, we spoke with them. Consider how much you can say without uttering a single syllable. Even today, if you're across a noisy street and a friend catches your eye, a simple nod can mean "I see you." A wave might mean "come over." A stiff posture could mean "stay back." Now, magnify that necessity by imagining a world without spoken words. Your entire social and survival network depends on your ability to read and send physical signals. Anthropologists, studying great apes, our closest living relatives, have documented dozens of distinct gestures used in the wild, each with specific meanings. A chimpanzee extending an arm palm up is asking for food. A gorilla standing tall with arms spread is asserting dominance. Early humans likely used a similarly rich set of physical cues. But there's an important twist. Our ancestors were bipedal. Walking on two legs freed up the hands, not just for carrying tools or food, but for making gestures. With the hands no longer bound to locomotion, they could become messengers. A flat palm might halt a group mid-step. Two quick hand waves might redirect attention. A circular hand motion could mean "gather around." We also have to think about posture as a language. Standing tall could project confidence or authority. Hunching forward could signal submission or fear. Turning one's back could mean disinterest or dismissal. These weren't conscious choices in the way we think about communication today. They were instinctive, woven into our very survival instincts. Body language also worked on the micro scale. Small, subtle adjustments that carried huge meaning in a close-knit group. The angle of your shoulders towards someone could signal openness or hostility. Leaning in slightly could mean you were listening intently. A quick shift away could show discomfort or disagreement. This physical vocabulary was universal within a tribe. But like dialects, it may have varied from one group to another. A gesture meaning danger in one tribe could be meaningless or even insulting in another. This suggests that just as languages evolve, so too did these early gesture systems. When we examine this through the lens of survival, it's easy to see why body language evolved so early. In hunting, speed and stealth were everything. You couldn't shout across the savannah without scaring off your quarry. In conflict, revealing too much could be fatal, but a quick movement could coordinate allies. In courtship, body language conveyed interest or rejection long before words could smooth or complicate the process. In many ways, our bodies were our first dictionaries. Every limb, every muscle, every stance was a letter or a word. And in the absence of spoken language, the way you stood could say more than 1,000 sentences ever could. If the body was the first vocabulary, the face was the poetry. The human face is a remarkable canvas. With 43 muscles capable of creating over 10,000 expressions, it's one of the most intricate communication tools in the animal kingdom. And unlike words, facial expressions are processed almost instantly by the human brain. You don't have to translate a frown or a smile, you feel it. Even today, across cultures, many facial expressions are universal. A furrowed brow signals worry or confusion. Wide eyes can signal surprise or fear. A genuine smile, one that wrinkles the eyes, communicates warmth and trust. These expressions are so deeply rooted in our biology that they're recognized by people who have never met, never shared a culture, and never spoken the same language. In the Stone Age, facial expressions likely carried enormous weight. Around the fire, a storyteller might widen their eyes to heighten suspense, or raise their eyebrows to hint at a twist. In a hunting party, a tight jaw might mean danger ahead. A soft gaze could calm a frightened child without a sound. Eye contact itself was a powerful signal. Holding someone's gaze could challenge them, comfort them, or warn them depending on the context. Looking away might signal submission, respect, or fear. In a world where cooperation was essential, these small cues could keep the social fabric from tearing apart. Scientists have even found that certain expressions may have evolved as survival tools. The fear face, with eyes wide and nostrils flared, not only signals danger to others, but also increases the sender's own visual field and oxygen intake, preparing them to act quickly. The disgust face, with a wrinkled nose, actually reduces airflow, protecting the body from harmful smells or airborne toxins. But facial communication wasn't just about emotion. It was about coordination. A quick raise of the eyebrows between two hunters could confirm readiness. A pursed lip could say, "Stay quiet," and in intimate moments, a lingering smile or softened eyes could forge bonds that words could never match. In many ways, the language of the face was the first emotional script humans ever followed. It allowed complex feelings to pass from one mind to another in less than a heartbeat, something words, for all their power, can rarely achieve as quickly. When we think of communication without words, we often picture hand signals, gestures, or facial expressions. But for our ancestors, sound was just as important, even before language as we know it existed. Close your eyes and imagine the ancient world. No traffic, no humming refrigerators, no city buzz. Instead, you hear the wind moving through tall grass, the low rumble of distant thunder, the calls of animals echoing across a valley. In that soundscape, the human voice, even without words, was a powerful tool. Early humans used grunts, hums, whistles, and other nonverbal vocalizations to convey meaning. These weren't random noises. They were shaped by need, emotion, and shared understanding. A sharp, short grunt could mean "look here." A low, drawn-out hum might signal calm. A quick series of clicks could warn others of danger without alerting nearby prey. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer societies have observed that many still use nonverbal sounds in daily life. The Hadza people of Tanzania, for example, sometimes whistle to guide each other during a hunt. Certain groups in the Amazon use specific humming patterns to signal the location of hidden traps or to summon someone from a distance. Why sound? Because, unlike gestures, it could travel through darkness, thick forest, or fog. It could reach someone without them having to see you. It could carry urgency or subtlety depending on pitch, rhythm, and volume. Importantly, early humans likely had a sound library specific to their tribe. Just as gestures varied from group to group, so did these pre-words. One tribe's danger call might be another's hunting signal. This created both security and potential misunderstanding. An unfamiliar sound might mean nothing, or it might mean everything. But sound wasn't just for warnings and instructions. It was also emotional. A soft coo could soothe an infant. A rhythmic chant could unite a group during a long march. A triumphant yell could celebrate a successful hunt, even without words. Sound could bind people together. Some researchers believe that singing, or something like it, may have existed before speech. The theory goes that early humans used melodic sounds to strengthen social bonds, coordinate group activity, or pass down knowledge in a memorable way. Music, in this view, isn't a luxury, it's a survival tool. So while the world before words wasn't filled with sentences, it was filled with sound. Sound carried warnings, emotions, and stories, and in the right hands, or the right voices, it could change the fate of an entire group. One day, an early human picks up a piece of charcoal from the remains of a fire and drags it across the wall of a cave. The mark is simple, maybe a line, a handprint, a crude shape, but it's not random. It means something. This moment marks a shift from communication in the present moment to communication across time. A gesture or sound vanishes as soon as it's made. A mark stays. Cave paintings, carvings, and arrangements of objects were the first permanent messages. Some told of hunts, stylized animals with spears or arrows. Others might have been warnings, symbols near dangerous areas or poisonous plants. Some were spiritual or ritualistic, an attempt to connect with forces beyond the physical world. Archaeologists have found geometric shapes, repeated across ancient sites separated by thousands of miles and years. This suggests that early humans developed symbolic thinking, the ability to let one thing stand for another. A spiral might represent the sun or the cycle of life. A cluster of dots might count days or seasons. Even the famous hand stencils, found in caves around the world, may have carried messages. Were they signatures? Declarations of presence? Ritual marks to connect the living with ancestors? We can't know for sure, but we know they were deliberate. Objects could be symbols, too. Arranging stones in a circle might signal a meeting place. Leaving a certain type of feather on a path might mark a territory. The key was that everyone in the group knew the meaning, even if outsiders didn't. These signs and symbols didn't replace gestures or sounds. They expanded the communication toolkit. They allowed humans to speak not just to those nearby, but to those who would come later. And that's the beginning of something huge. The human ability to share information across generations. Once you can pass knowledge beyond your own lifespan, you stop starting from scratch. You begin to build culture. We often think of communication as something visual or audible. But there's another channel, one that's deeply primal: touch. For early humans, touch was both practical and emotional. A reassuring hand on the shoulder could calm someone after a scare. A firm grip could signal urgency. Holding hands could strengthen bonds, especially in the dark or dangerous places. Touch also played a role in hierarchy. A dominant individual might assert their position with a certain kind of pat or grasp. Subordinates might show deference by allowing or avoiding certain touches. These patterns are still seen today in many primate species. Space, or the lack of it, was another powerful signal. Sitting close to someone around the fire might indicate trust or intimacy. Keeping distance could signal tension or mistrust. In a hunting scenario, spacing communicated roles. The scout stayed ahead. The main group followed at a safe but responsive distance. Even sleeping arrangements spoke volumes. Who slept near the fire? Who was on the edge of the group, exposed to danger? These choices were rarely random. They reflected relationships, trust, and responsibility. In short, touch and space were a silent, physical language, one that could comfort, threaten, invite, or reject without a single glance or sound. Imagine 50 people moving through the forest in near-perfect silence. No words, no shouts, just a synchronized rhythm of movement, each person reading the other's cues. That's silent coordination, a skill honed over millennia. Group hunts, migrations, and ceremonies all required collective action. And without spoken language, timing and unity came from shared, nonverbal systems. A raised hand, a nod, a stomp, each could trigger a cascade of responses. Rituals also played a role. Before a hunt, the group might gather in a circle, perform certain movements, or exchange specific touches. These actions reinforced identity and focus. During seasonal migrations, markers along the route could signal where to rest, when to change direction, or where danger lay ahead. Over time, these repeated patterns became part of a group's cultural identity. Outsiders might not understand the meaning of a certain dance or gesture, but within the group, it was as clear as any sentence. Silent coordination wasn't just practical, it was bonding. Moving together, acting in sync, created trust, and trust was the glue that held early human communities together. Eventually, gestures, sounds, symbols, and rituals began to merge into something more structured. Proto-language. This wasn't language as we know it, but it was a step beyond isolated signals. Instead of a single gesture, meaning danger, combinations of gestures and sounds could communicate danger from the west, or danger, but not urgent. This layering of meaning allowed more complex planning. It also meant humans could talk about things not immediately present. The hunt tomorrow, the storm last week, the path over the mountain. Some researchers believe that certain sounds began to attach to specific meanings, forming a shared vocabulary. Over generations, these proto-words became more refined, paving the way for fully developed spoken language. The leap from silence to speech didn't happen overnight. It may have taken tens of thousands of years, but once it began, it transformed human life forever. To understand how our ancestors communicated without words, anthropologists study modern hunter-gatherer societies. While these groups have languages today, they also rely heavily on nonverbal systems, especially in situations where silence is vital. For example, the San people of southern Africa use subtle hand signals during hunts, much like those likely used by early humans. In the Amazon, some tribes employ elaborate body painting, not just for decoration, but as coded messages about status, readiness for war, or participation in a ritual. These practices suggest continuity, echoes of ancient systems still alive in the modern world. They remind us that nonverbal communication isn't a primitive leftover. It's a core human skill. Today, we live in a world dominated by words, spoken, written, and digital. But the old systems never left us. We still raise our eyebrows in surprise, lean in to show interest, step back to create space. We still use tone and rhythm in our voices, even without words to express emotion. We still understand that a hug can say more than any sentence. The legacy of silent speech is in every interaction we have. It's in the handshake before a deal, the glance across a crowded room, the quiet nod between friends. And perhaps that's the greatest lesson our ancestors left us. Words are powerful, but meaning lives in more than language. We were storytellers, allies, and dreamers long before we could speak, and in many ways, we still are.